Good afternoon again, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. On behalf of Manila House, this is Bambina Alvarez, your Director of Programming, welcoming members and non-members alike to today's talk, which is held in partnership with Asian Society. I'd also like to welcome to today's talk Asian Society members. I'm very much looking forward to today's discussion, which talks about fashion and identity. Fashion, as we know, has always been an indicator of identity. Through fashion, you conform to convention or assert your individuality. But what about fashion as a symbol of national identity? We talk about clothes making the man, but what about fashion defining a nation and the culture? What does that really mean? And is it commercially viable? I'd like to quote an academic named Dr. Jessica Bugg, who wrote, "Fashion is a product of its socioeconomic and cultural environment. It functions on many levels. It can be political, concept, or statement-driven, craft and production, or a mannerism, style or image, and it is a multi-million-pound business. In recent years, the subject of fashion has also raised its status as a culturally significant and serious area of theoretical and academic debate, and is also an important part of a country's cultural capital, creative industries, and economy." So joining us today is an international panel of designers and design advocates from the Philippines. And we have also joining us Craig Jacobs from South Africa and Gabrielle Franson, who's based in Germany, but is currently tuning in from France. So let me introduce today's speakers. But before we proceed, just a few ground rules. This webinar is being recorded. It will be up in our the Manila House YouTube in a day or so. So please refer it or access for the link. And if you have any questions, we'll have time to get to your questions. We'll have a Q&A after, and please put them in the Q&A box or the chat box, and we'll get to them. So let me introduce today's speakers. Rahul Laurel is one of the Philippines' top fashion designers and has always had a passion for design since his early years. He trained under renowned fashion institutions, New York Fashion Institute of Technology and Central St. Martin. He bridges traditional and artisanal techniques from his Filipino roots to the global contemporary. Anne-Marie Robichon-Sagil was born and raised in the Philippines with an American father and Filipino mother. Her college years were spent in California, where she received her bachelor's degree in textiles from the University of California, Davis, and then later a degree in fashion design from the Fashion Institute of Design and Merchandising in San Francisco. She then spent many years working in New York City's fashion industry, where she gained valuable experience in design and production. Later, wanting to reconnect with her roots, Sagil moved back to the Philippines and founded Mosaic, which went on to become a leading women's clothing brand in the low retail scene. After a successful 10-year run with her first fashion label, Sagil decided it was time to listen to a long, persistent desire to explore deeper into the art of Filipino embroidery and the value of sustainable, slow fashion. Thus, Amari was born, time with a major mission, Filipino craftsmen alive, while sustaining lives and making a positive impact on her beloved Philippines. Now, Craig Jacobs, who joins us from Johannesburg, studied sociology and media at the University of Technology, Sydney. He has worked for a host of media platforms, including Us Magazine in the US, Australian directional culture and design magazine Cream, and the Sunday Times in South Africa, where he introduced fashion and decor coverage before going on to produce his private column, The A-Listers. He also worked across radio and TV, including co-presenting the South African episode of Jody Kidd's global fashion program, Fashion Avenue, for the US Style Network. At the heart of Craig's belief are that our taste, interests, and consumer behaviors do not happen by chance. A panoply of events, stimuli, and environmental influences play a role in what we choose to buy and how we choose to live. A determination to create a platform to bring positive change is what inspired and creates Conduity as a conduit to tell African stories. Gabrielle Franson joins us from France today, and she has been a European fashion fixture for over 20 years. Originally based in Munich, Gabrielle started her career by running the multi-brand store Franson in France. In 2003, she founded her own distribution agency, Best of 19, which she still successfully runs to date, while also working as brand ambassador for brands like Philip Lim. Franson has been captivated by the power and influence of well-chosen accessories all her life. Testing out her creations personally for months before, the ability to personalize how a woman wears Gabrielle Franson's pieces has become the cornerstone of her mission as a designer, giving the wearer a well-made, beautifully designed piece to make her own. Now, as a Philippine Star columnist, board member of the Child Protection Network and Think for Life Foundation, an advocate for the best of Filipino artistry, she's a driving force behind Katutubo, a pop-up market that is focused on showcasing Philippine fashion and accessories and urging people to wear your culture. And Anya Lim is the Princess Aunt and co-founder, managing director of Fabric Gallery, and co-enter exploring to support sustainable livelihoods among fashion Philippine artisan communities through circular and contemporary design, as well as capacity building through community enterprise and development. With over a decade of experience in community development, her immersion began as a volunteer with international nonprofits, where she did work on resource mobilization and advocacy communication. Anya finished her master's in communications for social change at the University of Queensland in Australia. She is passionate about community entrepreneurship and showcasing our handcraft traditions for women's socioeconomic empowerment. So with that, let me turn you over to Rahul. Maybe Rahul, you can start by telling us about your fashion journey.
Oh, okay. Hi, everyone. Gosh, I started actually 27 years ago professionally in the Philippines. However, my love for fashion really began in theater. My grandmother founded the Repertory Philippines, and I was a young stage actor. But slowly I was drawn to the power of the costume. And from there, I fell in love with making clothes. And I started my career by designing my classmates' prom dresses in high school. And then from there, my parents said, okay, since you are already on that path, why don't you learn how to do the clothes? And I guess that was it. Then I came home from New York and started making clothes.
Okay, thanks. Can I go to Anne-Marie?
Okay, hi everybody. Well, I guess what my fashion journey, it started, I guess, a very long time ago. I started in, it was first a college degree, textiles. It had nothing to do with fashion. It was actually a very scientific course. And I just found myself in that course and said, oh my God, I just have to finish this, right? So I finished that degree and eventually went on though to, working for companies in the US, like Jessica McClintock and brands like that. And then later on, I decided I wanted to go deeper into it and study fashion design and the whole pattern making and designing and all of that. So that's what I did eventually, and then worked in the US with different companies. And eventually wanted to come back to the Philippines. And that's where I started Mosaic, which was a retail, sort of chain of store, not really a chain. I only had like a couple, but I started those stores called Mosaic. So it was just ready to wear women's clothing. And then after about 10 years of that, I decided I was tired of just turning over fashion. I wanted to do something a little more with more meaning. I wanted to spend more time working on designs that I loved. I wanted to focus on embroidery. I was always in love with the embroidery of the Philippines. So that's how Amari started, and that's what I'm doing now.
Thanks. Thank you, Anne. Let's go to Craig. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how you got into this business and how you started your own label?
Yes, well, in my case, I came from a completely different background. I'd studied sociology and media, and I was working as a journalist. And I started gravitating towards kind of looking at African stories in a different kind of way. And I realized that clothing is quite a powerful conduit to celebrate African culture. And I really wanted to do something that celebrated Africa, but in a way that's really, really meaningful. So I fell in love with the cloth from one of the tribes here, the Venda cloth, which is a very distinctive colorful stripe cloth that they embroider on. And that started me on my journey, because then I came to discover this lake called Lake Fundutsi, which is a very sacred lake for the vendor people who believe you can hear their ancestors drumming underneath the water at night. And that was my aha moment. And that's how my label came about. And from there, it's just been a journey to tell African stories through clothing and be sustainable as possible and celebrate African artisanal skills and culture.
Great, thank you. Anya, would you have a similar journey as well? Because you also started out with textiles, right?
Yes, that's correct. I think Craig and I share a lot of similar stories. I think I've never really had any interest in fashion, I would say, and I'm not a fashion designer like most of you are. But I think my journey in fashion started with how I was raised. I grew up very curious about the different indigenous communities in the Philippines and all the different traditional clothing that they wear. And so very early on in my younger years, I was fortunate to be immersed in all of these indigenous communities and witnessed firsthand also the social pain and the gaps in cultural continuity. So Anthill was really founded to address the gap in cultural transmission because, as you guys know, in the past, there was only a lot of elder women weaving our textiles, and it wasn't relevant anymore for younger women to learn the craft. I also read somewhere that our ancestors considered our textiles our second skin, and I thought it was something we should celebrate. And so when we established Anthill, that was kind of the goal in mind for us to be able to showcase the value of our weaves and elevate them so that it can be used for contemporary weaving and people can wear it every day.
Thank you. Thanks. Gabrielle, you're coming from a slightly different perspective. So I think it would be more Western in a way, we could say. So maybe tell us a bit more about how you got started and what you're doing. Oh, I think you're on mute.
Hello,
Gabrielle,
can you hear me? Can you hear me now? Okay, wonderful. Yeah. I mean, my fashion journey started very, very early. Already as a child, I played with my grandmother's clothes. I made a theater for the whole street. So my mother is a sewing master. My grandparents had been weavers and my grandparents shoemakers. So it was kind of in my genes maybe. But I became a designer just in 2009. I started my own line. Before that, I had a wonderful multi-brand store with my mother, carrying multi-brands when nobody talked about it already. So we had a kind of mixture between, we had Prada and all the major lines, but also individual, very unique brands. So this was kind of our idea. And then my husband forced me, as I always found brands on the entire world, to open up a multi-brand showroom. That's how I met Philip Lim, for example, which you mentioned before. But in 2008, I had kind of a tiredness in all the accessories and every woman wore the same. So I said, I should maybe start something. And I had this dream and my husband really again forced me to do it. And then, you know, I'm kind of like, I never studied fashion design. I'm kind of an entrepreneur in this and went to New York and built up my brand there because I said, I want to make it there. And yes, it does pretty well since then. And then from costume jewelry, which I started with, I went into bags. And yeah, that's kind of my way. Now it's 12 years I'm doing this and I enjoy it.
Thanks. And now for a completely different perspective, I'll ask Mons Romulo, because she's not a designer, but she's found a way to synthesize all of this and create a venue actually for designers, especially designers with a Filipino ethos. Mons, you want to tell us how Kapatuba started?
Well, I would go to social events, and at the time, I think the influence was very Chinese. And whenever I go to Asian countries, I see people in Tokyo or people in Bali wearing their national attire. And it was so beautiful seeing them even wearing it in the mall, even the young ones. So when I got back, whenever I get back to get pictures, at the same time, I represent my dad, who was BFA secretary, and father, who was congressman. So I see all these government officials wearing the national costumes and even the wigs, and it was so beautiful. And then, due to lack of time, I go from a function, official function, to a social function. When I entered the social function in BGC or Makati, they would call me senator because at that time, whenever you'd wear anything Filipino, it's always associated with government officials or government workers. So I felt, why can't we be proud of this? And I was so proud with my batchmate Anne Fagil. I think she did the breakthrough when she did that Barong Tagalog, which we started seeing everyone wearing it from social to the mall. So I was so proud of her. So I said, and then I met Kaayo, Marga Nobrado, who was my friend in Congress. So I said, why don't we do a pop-up in Manila House? Manila House. So we started with 11 friends of mine. And it was such a hit. My dream was so that I wanted younger people to start wearing our Filipino terno in the malls. I wanted the young ones to, wear it with pride in luncheons without being looked up to the government. It's not that it's bad, but to be proud of their culture. And I was also happy that Bench Chan of Bench, started also this wear your culture thing. So that's how it started. So from 11 merchants, we went up to 65 merchants. But due to the pandemic, we went down to 40 merchants. But remember last July, we still did so well. Our sales were as much as the sales prior to pandemic. So I was afraid that we'd lose that momentum of people wearing, but I guess we've done it already. We just have to continue and support.
Great, thanks. Mom, just check your earphones, I think, maybe. There's a little, or your sound, there's a little static in your sound.
Yeah, there's sort of an echo, Mons.
Okay, what about now?
There,
okay.
Perfect, yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone for that introduction into your respective careers. Now, let's just have a little discussion about clothes and, like I said, the topic, national identity. Like, I wanted to ask each of you, how important does your, for example, being a Filipino, being a German, being South African, play into your fashion? I mean, I might be wrong here, but I would say maybe, Raho, your clothes are basically timeless, seasonless, borderless also. It's maybe in many ways a very Western ethic, you'd say, but then you are very adamant about being a Filipino designer, right? So how do you reconcile all that without necessarily weaving in the touches that we see in a lot of clothing now that passes for that's considered, emblematic of our culture? Like, for example, like what Anne's wearing, what I'm wearing, what Mons is wearing, or what Anya's wearing.
Well, in my case, that has always been my identity from the very onset, from the very beginning. Fashion, in my understanding, is a lot of white noise. And the only way to truly clear through all that white noise is to be who you are. And me, being a Filipino, that was my identity as a designer. That was the vocabulary I chose to speak. That is the language of which I can express my creativity and my art. And I thought, and I still believe, that it is what sort of like pushes through after all these years of creating clothes, that in my core truth, in my core authentic self, my aesthetic is intrinsically Filipino. And if you understand who we are as a nation, as a culture, I believe that we are actually truly the first global citizen because of all the people who entered our country. I mean, we were colonized by Spain, so we have that. But intrinsically, we are Malay, we have that. And of course, the United States came and we also had that. And the Japanese, for a short period of time, we have that. So all of this amalgamation truly sort of like defines who I am as a designer. And now with introduction and with the resurgence of all of this interest in in Philippine textiles, I think there's this beautiful renaissance that is actually quite happening at the moment.
Thanks. What about you, Craig? How does this translate for you? You're in mute. Hang on.
Sorry about that. I wanted to say in South Africa, we're quite an eclectic culture because we've got so many different cultures, and we've got over 11 official languages. We've got people who are indigenous from the Khoisan, who've been here for over thousands of years, to Western colonialists, we've got Afrikaners, we've got so many different cultures. So it's very difficult to kind of unpack it and think about identity in a very simplistic way. And when I came to creating my label, I thought about identity, and I thought about an opportunity to celebrate different cultures in a way that's true and honest. So for me, it's all about looking at different stories, looking at different cultural specifics, and celebrating it through the craft and what I create.
But is there a difference between, because it's a mixed society as well, whereas this is a mixed society where we are in the Philippines, but there's no kind of like, for example, ethnic, traditional woven fabrics are worn by everyone, can be worn by everyone, and actually are expressed in more fashionable, contemporary kind of styles. Whereas does that happen in South Africa, or do you have like white where don't necessarily wear what might be termed tribal or tribal inspired fabric or design?
It's quite interesting because, you know what, I mean, I think when it comes to the culture, we had a little bit of a storm in a teacup here with the Olympic uniforms for South Africans, where, because it's obviously anything that puts a nation on an international stage, you want to reflect culture. And when it comes to an eclectic culture, it's like kind of what do you draw inspiration from? And the reaction against what was presented was almost a little bit like kind of like, oh my God, that's not who we are, because people felt that it was quite kitsch and it wasn't modern and it wasn't celebratory of all the different diverse cultures. So it becomes quite it's a challenge because we do all come from different perspectives. When it comes to, like, for instance, cultural events or functions, when it's black tie, you do get on a dress code, it says black tie or traditional. And when it comes to traditional, it's basically whatever your culture is, you'll turn up wearing it. So if you're Indian, you could wear a sari, or if you're Zulu, you could wear something traditional. Women could incorporate like kind of beadwork or African fabrics, not even necessarily fabrics from South Africa, but from the rest of Africa, because that is tradition across the continent. So I think for us, what we should see in South Africa is to embrace all cultures and not be defined by one specific thing, because that means we've got a whole kaleidoscope of different references to draw from. And I think that's what makes it exciting.
Just a side note, Raho in fact designed the Philippine delegation to the Olympics, their uniforms, official uniforms, right?
Oh, wow.
Very nice. Yeah. And you did the previous ones as well, right? You've done a few of them. Yeah. Gabrielle, I'm gonna ask you now, yours is kind of like the default culture here, right? This is a white, European, Eurocentric and all that. That's actually what that's been the reference point for a lot of designers in the past, right? And so how does culture come into play with what you're doing?
Oh, when I listen to all the former designers, what they say, for me as a designer, I'm more focused on the individuality of every woman, no matter where she lives and what her profession is. That's, for me, it's more about being individual, having something different that's how my design falls into place, I would say. And culturally,
it's not necessarily natural. I mean, national, right?
Not at all. Not at all. It should be international. My clientele is worldwide based. I really, for example, my Australian market is very strong for me. And also the Japanese, they love my design. So actually, I'm not thinking, yeah, as you said, it's not driven by a very special, it should be individual and different.
But would you say the same, Anne? I mean,
yeah, so badly. I'm so sorry. Pardon me?
No, I'm asking Anne now how it translates to her, to what she does.
I think it's very interesting, exactly
more individual.
What
right?
Gabrielle is saying, because I think as designers, I don't think, well, at least for me, I don't feel like I set out there to say, oh, you know, this is Filipino or this is, I think we all as designers just try to express ourselves as, I think design is expressive, exactly what Rahul was saying. So at the end of the day, I think for me, embroidery just happened to be this craft that I really fell in love with, and so that's how I interpreted it. But I feel that basically I don't think identity is something that we really push for. We're not waving a flag here or anything. I mean, I don't feel like I am, at least. I just feel that no matter what, because I grew up here, this is my home. The Philippines is my my influence. So it's my aesthetic also, because this is where I was, this is where I grew up, you know, everything. So just by virtue of that, I think that's how our culture comes through. Like we don't have to be, you know, having burda, embroidery or weaves or anything, but by virtue of being in the Philippines or being a Filipino designer in the Philippines, your identity, your culture comes through, especially if you're abroad. At the end of the day, you'll be, hey, oh yeah, no, she's Filipino. Like I always like to say Joanna Ortiz, for example, who's Colombian, but I don't think her designs are very, she just expresses herself. This is her aesthetic. And then she happens to be Colombian also.
But, anyone, you can join in if you want. But like with Joanna Ortiz, obviously she's a great example of that. There's a spirit, an essence to her fashion, right? That feels Colombian. It doesn't necessarily have to have any of these folkloric details, for example, right?
Yeah.
But right, Mon, you can say something.
When we started Katutubo, my focus was Philippine fabrics. But then I realized there's still limitations, and I think Anya can explain further about that. So why limit ourselves? At the end of the day, like when we put together Katutubo, when they ask me if they can join, if it's a Filipino designer, they represent the Philippines. So what, and our culture. So we have to support the weavers. We have to support our heritage, our culture. But at the same time, we also have to celebrate our designers who are there making beautiful clothes. Sometimes their fabrics, due to the limitations of our fabrics, they have to order abroad. But then again, it's a Filipino culture and intelligence that comes in when they design a certain clothing. So that alone is a celebration of culture.
Anya, you want to chime in?
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I think when you talk about designing for identity, it's not just limited to using indigenous or hand-woven Philippine textiles, right? Like all of us here are celebrating our talent through our way of expressing our own aesthetic. And that still is somewhat our identity. It's still celebrating one's identity. But with our specific brand, with Anthill, designing for identity has always been at the core of our DNA, because as a social enterprise, we're addressing a particular social issue. So when we design for identity, we also take into consideration not just those who will wear our weaves, but also the weavers, the younger weavers who themselves actually have a poverty of identity. Like when we started working with these weavers, what they wanted to do was to westernize, and they themselves didn't have any appreciation of their local craft, their local talent, and the local resources. And this disrupted family dynamics. A lot of the younger weavers are wanting to become domestic helpers or factory workers abroad. And there's nothing wrong with that, but they didn't value what they already know and what was passed on to them. So to us, that was really the end goal in mind. We wanted to make our weaves contemporary. And when we say contemporary, it's not limited to butterfly sleeves and the terno or the Filipiniana. It can be any design that also is very sensitive and very considerate of the Philippine woman's aesthetic and personality, as what Gabrielle said. And through the years, it's quite evolved a lot. And as what Miss Mons mentioned, the fabrics alone, our local fabrics alone, has a lot of limitations. So if we want to continue on growing the movement of younger Filipinos or the movement of Filipinos themselves taking pride in our local design and our local textiles, we need to also be innovative and be open to combining commercial fabrics or commercially woven fabrics with indigenous fabrics. And so we've done that as well.
There's a little bit of an issue with the local woven fabrics, right? I mean, there's also they're quite thick sometimes, so it's not always easy to wear. How do you work with that?
Yeah, there's quite a lot of limitations. So the designer's feedback, Raho, Miss Anne, who I've talked to, it's always the width. So that's our greatest challenge because it's very also limited.
Also the feel, the
texture,
the texture, it's because I think of the yarns. If we use more cotton, I think it would be
softer.
Cooler, especially here.
Breathable.
Where we live.
Yeah. And it doesn't flow like a silk or a chiffon. Like it's not suitable for gowns. It's very limited in terms of the fall, right, Rahul?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
There's a lot of limitations.
However, with that being said, I think as designers, we use that particular challenge and pivot it in towards this particular amazing thing. I mean, yes, there's going to be always a challenge. Yes, there will always be a problem. But as a creative, I don't really consider it a problem. I use that particular challenge to make it the special feature of the fabric itself. I mean, for me, limitations are just another word for you not being too creative enough. So for me, that's just that's not an issue.
And true enough, like you see that evident in the number of designers and vendors that Miss Mons has, because 10 years ago when we started Anthill, it's probably just a couple of brands using weaves for contemporary wear. But now, as Rauho said, people are getting creative and innovative in using the woven textiles into something that's still very Filipino.
How does that work for you? What's the quality of the fabrics that you have to work with in South Africa, the local ones?
Well, what I wanted to actually pick up on was something about what Anya was saying, is about an identity and celebrating the makers. And for me, when it comes to looking at identity, I was looking at the artisanal skills, the traditional skills that we have in South Africa. So the beadwork, like the Zulu love letters, the batik fabric that people do produce themselves, embroidery they do. And for me, that's a visual language that we need to preserve and also modernize so that we can create like kind of opportunities for these makers who are mostly rural women who sole breadwinners for rather large families. So for me, I felt I needed to create an opportunity for them to be able to have a sustainable business, as well as feeling pride about their own identity and also allowing South Africans to not just think about wearing traditional in a traditional scenario, but you can incorporate it into every day. So that for me is also then coming back to Gabrielle saying about identity and the personal and identity is how she designs. For me, culture is so personal, and how we interpret culture makes it personal and also makes it distinctive. So when you see something that's produced in Africa. And when I have customers from overseas who see it, they feel that's fresh and different and something they can't necessarily find where they live. And that's why they embrace it. To come back, Bambina, to your question about fabrication. So we don't have that much local fabric. I mean, the major fabrics from South Africa, which is traditional, is called sishweshwe, which is a cotton-based fabric, which is then printed on in a certain kind of process. And that actually originally was not even created here. It came from Europe, but it was embraced by South African culture many hundreds of years ago. So it's more the craft, it's more the artisanal skills which make South African fabric so distinctive.
Can I just add? I also wanted to say, sorry, that yeah, no, I was going to say with the local weaves, especially I've used Anya's weaves, and they're definitely, I mean, yes, there are limitations, but yes, like Rahul says, we do still work with them, and it is a challenge. And in fact, I've made, I think, like really very successful pieces with Anya's weave, and actually, I want some more. That's been a problem, right? And then like getting more of the same thing. So, but I am so happy that Anya is there to help all of us designers work through these issues, because it's very hard as a designer to be designing and then also working with weavers, you know? So, and having a brand and then working with weavers. That's why I really appreciate Anthill for being there, for working with all these, in all the far-flung places that she goes to work with all these weavers, and beautiful prints, beautiful crafts, beautiful beautiful design, and I love to work on them. And in fact, sometimes the problem is I can't get any more of it. That's it. So thank you, Anya.
Thanks so much, Ms. Anne. And if I may add, there's a huge ripple effect also in the pride that it gives to our weavers. You know, in the span of our work, we've actually increased the ratio of younger weavers to elder weavers by 50%. So because of designers like you who are working creatively in elevating the value of our weaves, when they see how it's incorporated in clothes and young people also wearing what they make, it gives them so much pride, and they see the relevance of them valuing their craft and continuing on the tradition.
I love what Rahul said, that people want nowadays, which you cannot get at every corner. It's so special. And that's what I truly, when I started, we manufactured in Germany, we manufactured in Italy, and so many people said, you can manufacture here or there and you can make more money. And I said, no, I want to know the person who sews it. I want to know, as you said, the weavers. It's all about, I even cannot stand it when people have things on the floors in the stores. I go and put it back onto the hanger, because every piece, there's a soul behind it who made it. And this is what I want to translate to all my customers, and they appreciate it. I know my Italians who print and who are doing the things for me. So, and this always was very, very important, long before people were talking about do this, do that, or now it's such a trend. But it's more than a trend. Do it by heart, and that's what I see with your weavers. You know, we have to tell them where we want to go, what the design should look like. And I'm, as you, I guess all of you are, very particular. And sometimes I say, oh, Gabrielle, you jump on my nerves. But I say, no, it's not right yet. It's not right yet. And we should never give up. And it's exactly what you all are saying. People, our clients, did it, and they really want to find something which is different, which is not at every corner, which is a thing by heart. And then you can wear it long, a lot. It's with you. It's like it should become your companion. That's always what I want. I want my bags to be worn out. I want them to be appreciated. This is how you can give fashion a soul, and how you can stand out as a designer. Or you have to, you see, I'm very passionate about this because it takes so much time and so much energy to fulfill this. What do you think about that?
Well, maybe you should jump in, because you've seen an evolution in the last few years just of doing katutubo.
Yeah, 2019, we had a tie-up with Anya. But prior to Anya, I had to do research work. I wanted to go straight to the weavers. We chose 10 designers, 10 merchants, 10 designers from Katutubo, and we gave them the same pattern, but I gave them the freedom to choose the color, but this was the same pattern, and it was up to them to do whatever they wanted. But it was so hard talking to different, some were overpriced and some were not giving the weavers what was due them. And it was through my research that I found Anya. So I was so happy. We were so excited, remember Anya? And it was such a success. We converted the bench tower ground floor into a fiesta place. We made it like looking like a small, looking like a barangay when you go to the provinces. And how you could see the beautifully done designs of the different designers, and we brought in weavers through the help of Anya too. So again, Anya, thank you so much. Thank you for what you've been doing. Yeah.
No, thank you also for all the support. It takes a village, and it's really an ecosystem. And without the help of design collaborators, we won't be able to revive the weaving industry.
Maybe we can do that again, Anya, after the pandemic.
Yeah, we should. That was such a successful
I really
run.
enjoyed that one. I
Yeah.
mean,
Bambina, that was the time that we saw all Abel work. So I said we wanted to get out from that pattern, but it's also so beautifully weaved. So that's why me and Anya sat down, and she just showed me an album filled with patterns and weaves, and I just randomly chose what I felt would sell and would attract also the buyers, because of course our designers have to earn too, and it did so well. So maybe after this pandemic we can do something as big as that to Anne.
yeah, it was so, and the great thing about it was that you picked a fabric, but then we also, as designers, we had the freedom to choose our own colors, to sort of play with it a little bit, to give it, some kind of individuality.
Yeah, it was your palette that made it different, the color palette that you chose.
Exactly, yes. Yeah. And it did really well. People kept wanting more. But again, and also like Rahul says, very narrow, but you're going to work on that now that you're there.
Actually, kasi remember, Anya, to do that a bigger width, you need two people to simultaneously do that. Right. So it's an ongoing process. It's hard to train.
Yeah, so the fabric
to the size of the loom.
Yeah, the fabric is called ramit, which was handwoven by the Mangyan tribe. It's actually very similar to what Craig's blazer looks like.
Yes.
It's a geometric pattern.
That is amazing, because this is shweshwe. This is the African shweshwe that I was talking about, which is only the only traditional cotton we have in South Africa.
It's amazing. But this fabric is woven in a backstrap loom. So the width is limited to the length of the arm that the weaver can reach. So that's why it's challenging in terms of like constructing, say, a bigger piece of blouse or dress, because then you'll have so much wastage, which is also something that designers avoid.
Have to.
Wow. So it's something that really can't be industrialized. There's that real individual artisanal aspect to it.
Absolutely. I mean, the beauty, Bambina, for all those international watchers out there, is the Philippines is really an archipelago, and each particular region has a different weave that we specialize in.
Like for every
absolutely. So, for instance, in the Middle Islands, we have in Iloilo, we have a particular weave that's there. In the north, we also have a weave that's there. In Mindanao, there's also a weave that's there. So it's all of these wonderful, beautiful things that as a designer, I pick up and, everybody gets inspired from. But that's the usage that makes it contemporary. And I think as contemporary designers, we have to sort of like think beyond that, like beyond what, how should we make it contemporary? That's always my thrust is how to make it modern, how to make it relevant, how to make it useful. Otherwise, it will die. But right now, I mean, as you know, there is this renaissance, a renaissance of beautiful textiles, which will be actually the signature voice of the Philippines. And that is why that is our identity. And that's why all of this is happening now. It's a celebration. I mean, we may be sort of like cooped up in our little homes because of the pandemic, but our work continues.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, Gabrielle. Oh.
Yeah. Bambina, we also have to give credit to Anne Sagil, because it's the embroiderers. I mean, she's giving the embroiderers more work, and every Amari piece is beautifully and tastefully done, that we can be so proud of, even abroad, wearing it abroad. So I think Anne also did Anne Sagil also, they're both Anya and did a very great job in yeah.
It's different. Instead of a weave, it's just really focusing on the embroidery craft.
Yeah. Which is also good. Yeah.
Well, but then it brings me back to what Gabrielle and Craig were both saying about, I mean, it's really an antidote to fast fashion, right? Because fast fashion, you don't think about the soul of an outfit when you buy something from a high street, chain. So these are clothes, obviously, with meaning. It's really like slow fashion, like Anne was saying. There's a story with every piece of clothing, right? And I think it gives it more value, or I certainly put more value on clothes that that weren't mass produced, or and you also feel that they express who you are more. They capture who you are more,
Absolutely. And I think also just picking up on what Rajo was saying about how there's a celebration of Filipino craftsmanship. I think in the world today, especially because we've been spending so much time pausing and thinking, and we've been looking for things for meaning, we've been looking for soul. And I think that in the world, I mean, globally, we've seen shifts in terms of consumer behavior where they're looking for things that feel a little bit more true, that have a story that relates to them in a tangible way. And I think that probably makes right now such an exciting place for local artisans and cultures all around the world, because we are going to see a shift against the ubiquity of fast fashion and even the ubiquity of luxury. Because, I mean, how luxury is it when over 10,000 people have the same handbag, So I think that identity and culture are going to be more of a pull factor when it comes to fashion and design.
Or actually the story behind the brand or the products that you have.
Absolutely.
Right? It's really basically, that's, I think, what's maybe the future of how people are buying their clothes. They want that feeling, that soul behind it.
There's still a market for those luxury brands that have people queuing around the block for, the it bag of the moment, right? Or does that come with a kind of style evolution or fashion evolution or consciousness evolution, I suppose? Because also we have to remember that, with the last climate crisis report was really scary, right? What's happening in the
Absolutely.
world. So sustainability is really important. Wasn't it Greta who just said that, even brands that say they're sustainable are not really sustainable. There's more to it than, just using recycled material, right?
Yes.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, especially when considering, in the world today, clothing is the second biggest cause of landfill. When so much harm is done in terms of how garments are being manufactured. And I'm excited. I didn't know that much about Filipino weaving until today, but if you think about it, that's an organic, natural, sustainable way of producing. There's no harm to the environment, and it's the same way. I always say to people think sustainability and organic is modern. And I say, no, actually, that's the way of life in Africa. That's how we lived as hunter-gatherer societies. And it's actually, Western society seems to think that organic and sustainable is their new concept, but it's really just coming back to indigenous societies all around the world.
I was going to Anya does very much of a circular, right, Anya?
Circular,
you don't waste
economy.
anything. You upcycle fabric, right? I mean, and you have so much to contribute I think, in terms of that.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at sustainability, it has so much layers to it, right? But through the years, we started really looking at the aspect of cultural preservation in the beginning, and of course, creating that long-term economic impact to our weavers also. So looking at cultural and socioeconomic impacts. But then later on, we realized that, yeah, fashion is like the second largest contributor to pollution. And we also wanted to see how in our own little way, we can create a dent and, address this and bring out a solution. And so in 2016, we started experimenting on upcycling textile waste. We would get waste from different brands, actually, who've had a lot of end cuts from their production, from their manufacturing houses, and that started experimenting on upcycling these waste and reweaving them into new fabrics. And so our community in Argao, south of Cebu, is the only community in the Philippines that does that. They're able to upcycle textile waste into new fabrics, and even like the tiniest edging scraps, they're able to use as supplementary weft in order for us to upcycle it. And it's not obviously, it's just extending the life cycle of the material because it still is like polyester or cotton polyester. But I think it's a start, that instead of it going to waste or going to the landfill, we're able to really find other use for the fabric and still be able to put value into it.
Commercial viability of going, this route? If it, well, I mean, if for example, here, there's obviously a market. We can see it. I mean, Mons can see it also through Katutubo and everything. But if you want to go outside of the Philippines or outside of South Africa, for example, I mean, Craig, you've got clientele overseas. Is it really commercially? I mean, Rahul, you're in kind of in a different league because you do supply and you've dressed people overseas. But, for like, for example, Amri, you've joined coterie and all that. I mean, is there a future for that? Is there a way of breaking into the international market? And Gabriela also has been to Chanoy, right? Regularly.
Yes, I always join Chanoy. Mm-hmm.
I guess I think that at the end of the day, if the product is good, it will be noticed no matter what. Yeah. It's not about what your identity is, or it's got to be, I've always said, it has to be a good product first. And then they have to be attracted to it. They have to like it. They have to want to spend the money for it. And then they appreciate of course, that story sort of kind of goes hand in hand. But I think if you're talking about commercial viability, I think, and abroad, I think if they like it, then yeah, sure, why not? Definitely.
And just to add to that, Bambina, now because of this situation of the pandemic, it's so much easier for us to keep in touch. I mean, look at this conversation that we're having now. I mean, we're from all over the world at the moment. I mean, currently,
Tokyo, by the way. Yes.
And actually, you're sort of like so much easier. And I've realized because there are actually good things that are happening with this pandemic, that smaller designers like myself are able to sort of like reach out to designers even here and have a conversation and have a dialogue of how we can sort of like help one another. I mean, currently, I'm actually talking with this wonderful Japanese designer, Tomo, who does a lot of collaborative work for Sakai, for Pucci at the moment. And he's interested in actually how we can sort of like work together. So there are other ways to sort of like realize that this situation we're in is actually something good is coming out of it. Mm-hmm. It is because a lot of it's easier to reach out. It's easier to sort of like keep in touch. It's easier to connect. So I think that for me is I'm very excited about that, primarily because yes, I am a Filipino designer, but however, like everybody here, our clothes is pretty global. I mean, you can wear what Anne makes everywhere else. It's just a matter of being recognized, of being seen, and being, again, rise above the noise. How can you rise above the noise? And that's, for me, that was one way. But there are other ways to do it. But what I enjoy now more than ever is how easy it is to access somebody by sliding them a DM on Instagram and said, hey, you know, I love your bag. I have something like this, you know, and then that's where business comes in. And that's where the commercial viability at this point of time is happening.
If I may add, Bambina, I think this is entirely what Raho is talking about the renaissance, the cultural renaissance, and also the shift in our cultural consciousness. So like with us in Anthill, surprisingly, at the height of the pandemic, we launched our our textile store, but not like an entire online textile store yet. That's about to come soon. But surprisingly, there's been a huge wave of Filipino diaspora community who are actually seeking for local materials that they can use so that they can all also establish their own brands and design and use these local textiles for whatever creative products that they want to do. And so with that in mind, I think a lot of not just Filipinos, but a lot of designers are rethinking the way they create. And they're also looking at how they can source sustainably. And as what Ms. Anne said, it's very important to understand and put value in the process of how things are made. So I remember watching a video that Raho launched in the past, how it all started with like a sketch and then showing the entire process, the meticulousness of cutting it and the beadwork. And that alone is very important for people who are sourcing materials. But yes, in terms of commercial viability, definitely, I think if you put value in the process and if you're able to serve your customers properly, you should be able to make it global.
But I think you also have a global clientele, but maybe, Gabby, you can back me up on this, a global clientele that's more and more attuned to this as well. Right? Attuned to the value that's inherent in an item of fashion.
I don't think she heard. Oh, yeah. Oh. Gabrielle.
No, you asked me. I didn't hear you. Can you repeat it?
No, I was just saying, would you back me up on this? Because you're also, you know, you're also like a buyer of other brands, right? You represent other brands.
I represent.
You were saying in your multi-brand. So not anymore. Okay. No, but there must be a consciousness also globally, and maybe Craig, you can attest to this, globally for this kind.
If the product is good, and if the product has a meaning, and if the product has a soul, you have to talk about it, and it can go global. That's for sure.
It's good, and talk about the story. Perfect.
Yeah.
But what about cultural appropriation, though? Like, that's a little bit of a sticky subject, right? I mean, Tory Burch recently put some Mexican or Palestinian or whatever motifs on her clothes and didn't give the right attribution. And she was called out on it. I guess it's one of the best things about social media at the moment is that you can call out when, you know, these kinds of transgressions. But who gets to say who appropriates what, you know? And would you be flattered if an element of your design comes out in, you know, someone else's line, or, you know, it's a little bit of a sticky subject, right?
I have to say, from my perspective in South Africa, look, we're very sensitive to issues around other cultures embracing African cultures. It's an ongoing dialogue, but I think we also need to take a step back and think about it as, if someone else is celebrating your culture, then they are seeing something that you might not necessarily have seen. It's also kind of a little bit sensitive for me because I celebrate a tribe to which I don't belong. My culture is very diverse because my lineage is Asian, European, African, Mauritian. So for me, I think culture is something that evolves and changes. And as long as whoever is celebrating that culture, whoever's utilizing that culture or finding inspiration from it, does reference it, then who are we to disagree with that? I mean, I design African fabric kimonos made out of African fabric. And I hope that Japanese people are not offended by me taking their silhouette. So, yeah.
Yeah. It's an inspiration all over the world, I guess. We get inspired by so many influences, and yeah.
I just want to add, just if the intention is pure, if the intention was not to insult the culture and to sort of like hurt one another, I think that's one thing to be considered. But a dialogue is always important. And this happened, I mean, I think this topic is very important to discuss because of our canceled culture. However, if the intention was really not to meant any harm, as creatives, I think we should have that freedom to actually explore and leave it at that. But at the same time, also due diligence in researching whether or not this is appropriate or not, because sometimes it can be seen as insulting. But if the intention isn't meant to insult, then I think they should. That's something to be discussed as well further.
But should they actually say that, you know, like this shirt has embroidery that is referenced, you know, from say, for example, Navajo Indian, you know, traditions and all that? Should they disclose when they're launching the product?
No, I think that attribution needs to be done. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you need to reference where your inspiration comes from.
I think, Bambina, we had this discussion also, but I think also I think the whole appropriation problem happened, especially when it's big, like big designers, like for example, from the US, and then using sort of some tribal, you know, craft patterns in their designs. And then it doesn't, you know, it just gets lost in trend. Or, I mean, how do we really, you know, a dress is hanging there. There's really no reference to saying this is from the native Hawaiian tribe or something like that. So it's really hard to always give reference, I guess, but it is important, definitely. But I think issues like that came about, especially with big designers and big companies, you know, doing that. My daughter's in New York, so I spoke to her about this, and she also felt that, you know, I think, I mean, this is for, I guess I'm saying that because from someone in New York, if you're from the country and if you're there and you're giving jobs and helping people, then there's really no misappropriation there, right? But it's when big companies, like big brands, big designer brands like Tory Burch or whatever, using certain elements of different designs, then that's when I've seen, not that I have, but I've seen people then say something about it or have some kind of complaint or something to say about it being misappropriated.
I think generally, Bambina, we should all be careful in how we consume culture. And there's always that fine line in ensuring that we don't commodify culture in a disrespectful manner. So I go back to Raho's points, you know, like, I think more than calling out or holding people accountable, which is very healthy, we have to keep an open conversation and take it as an opportunity for us to be educated consumers, educated designers, educated creatives, and how we're going to be able to be more inclusive of the artisans, of the culture bearers, in the way we want to use their materials knowledge. You know, like Raho mentioned it, dialogue. I mean, it's a very simple word, but it's so important. Consultation through dialogue, asking questions, that process of inquiry, and really kind of getting to know the maker and what are the limitations of the fabrics, of the design, of where it can be used, where it can't not be used, should be of primary responsibility of the designer or the brand. And that should be like the first step, right? If you're sourcing a material and you want to use this particular fabric, ask questions, ask the limitations. It's not just about functionality and use, but also the meaning. Knowing that all these weaves mean something, then we have to be respectful of that. I think that entirely is just the bottom line, respect. And respect also means properly acknowledging who made it, how it's made, and where it is made of.
Exactly. I think you very well said. Thank you.
Yeah, but Bambina, I agree with Rahul when he said as long as the intentions are pure, because I've seen some of our fabrics, and also Anne's Barong Tagalog were copied in other countries like China. But you could see whenever I see it, there is no life. There's no, unlike when you see Anya's fabrics, our Philippine fabrics, from let's say Mindanao, or you see Anne's embroidery, you could see that there's, and I would tell you that there's life, there's so much love, soul. And we've seen also a lot of
is not mine, okay? It is the Philippine.
I know, but it's yes, but I've seen we've also experienced. But we've also experienced and that some people copy whatever embroidery that you had.
I think because when they use computerized, that's when it becomes flat. So that's where you're losing the soul. That's exactly what we're talking about. Because what I do is all hand done, I do have some hand guided machine embroidery, but I also have my very hand with the bastidor and everything. And that's where we're talking about. There's the people behind it, the artisans behind it. And so what you're talking about, that gets, when you see from China, for example, that's computerized embroidery, and it just doesn't compare because it's flat and it has no soul, no life.
Prices can be really different, Bambina. The prices are really low compared to the, but then again, it's not quality.
Send me Craig and Gabrielle's addresses. We'll send them samples.
Sure, definitely.
Oh wow, love that.
I should do that too.
Gabrielle, you manufacture in.
We can do a collaboration. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah,
definitely.
No, I wanted.
Gabrielle, you were saying. Oh no, go ahead, Mon.
I wanted to tell Craig also, maybe he can do something with Anya. At least we can also help promote our Philippine fabric.
Yeah.
We'll
send you your swatch book.
Thank you.
Yes. Do it, Bambina. We'll send them samples and just just getting it out there. This is what I mean.
I get 10% of everything.
Done.
Yeah.
I would like to say something into our wonderful group. I think it's about educating also the customers. So everybody here in our group is very passionate and very soulful with what we are doing. And we have to educate our clients. They have to know. So many people don't know. So we have to talk. Do you have to constantly talk about it? What do you think about that? I think we have to constantly, I mention all the time, we manufacture in Germany, we manufacture our raffia bags in Madagascar because they're skilled artisans, etc., etc. But longer as you talk about it, as better people will understand. And there will always be, unfortunately, I don't know for how long, fast fashion, but there will always be the educated customer who wants something different, who wants something more valuable. And we have to educate them that it's really wonderful to have something for a long, long time. Okay. I wore since, and I love Dries van Noten. He's my major designer, in my opinion. He's really my icon, and I have things from him 20, 30 years. And in the beginning, when I wore my pieces, people would say, yeah, but this is from past season, or this is from that season. And I said, yes, because it's a design, it's handcraft. I love it as older as it gets. And now there's finally a shift that people appreciate it also. And this is, I guess, what we all have to educate even more, that it's about the value of the product we are doing. What do you think about that?
Yeah, Gabrielle, that's what we're also trying to do in Katutubo. Every time we have a pop-up, people complain and tell me, how can we support the local brands, the local weavers, when it's so expensive, much more expensive than what we see in big stores like Zara? And I mean, sometimes you keep quiet, you know, you pick your fights, you pick your battles. But again, we have to learn to be patient and try to educate and let them know the quality that after washing, you still see that it still has the soul of the people behind it. Yeah.
Yeah.
We have someone in the. Oh, sorry, Gabrielle, go ahead. I'm just going to call on someone in the audience with something to say.
Every designer is a role model also, because he wants to be visual and to give something to the world which is different. I love the approach from Raul, from the South African. I learned so much. Thank you so much.
But I think Tina Baron, who wants to say something. Tina, did you have a question? Go ahead and
Yes, I wanted to respond to what Gabrielle just said about how it's all about educating the people, right? And I just wanted to say that in line with that, actually, SOFA Design Institute is coming up with a course. Actually, we launched it already and it's going to start in October. And the course is a masterclass about Filipino branding and identity, which is very much tagged to national identity branding. And the course starts out with reflection about Philippine art history, our people, culture, and society. And I truly believe that you have to start from there. So yes, education, Gabrielle, you're absolutely right. And you know, a lot of designers I guess skip that part.
No, but I think this is really timely, of course, like this, because Mons, you might actually back me up on this, because there are a lot of people now here, especially doing Filipino inspired clothing for every contemporary Filipino inspired clothing, but you also need to differentiate with, you know, what you're doing. One brand might end up looking like another because you have access to the same fabric or the same embroideries and all that. So branding also is really important, right?
Yeah, correct.
If you're all doing Filipino.
I think what Mons did with Katutubo was, what I really love about what she did was, it wasn't just that it was, you didn't have to just use indigenous materials or crafts. It was also, she opened it up to designers who were just Filipino designers, you know, using, at the end of the day, they're using seamstresses, they're using, you know, they're employing people. So, and I think that it makes the Katutubo a lot more interesting, exciting. It's not all it's not all using the same sort of thing. And I think it even highlights the beauty of our weaves even more when it's, you know, paired with all our other local designers. Like,
yeah, and I agree with completely. And what for me, I mean, because I'm also, you know, part of the Katutubo, it's really harnessing a sense of community, a sense of reaching out to one another, and not just, you know, in a very local setting. And right now it's a more global setting, but you know, holding each other's hands and just getting an opportunity to really talk amongst the designers and realize that it's so difficult now to have a dialogue like this. But it's also easy. But at the same time, the Katutubo makes it more tangible. And all our woes and all our problems and all our issues have a means to sort of like really touch base with another. For me, that's what I love about the Katutubo, is that I get in touch with my friends in the industry and shop talk, because that's one way when we can learn from each other, by discussing what's happening in our own little lives.
And there's no territorialism, like, you know, you don't want them to encroach on what you're doing. I mean, does that come into play, or there's room for everyone?
Oh no, in the Katutubo, just if Anne already brings out her champagne and the wine, I think everything's all right already. Everything is good in the world with They come in with a trolley.
Start, yeah.
By 1 o'clock, it starts to come out. The
Mandy
wine.
starts cheering everyone.
It's a great.
Wow, it's just like the real world. I've all said you.
Gabrielle and Craig, you must come and experience it. It's like no other.
Sounds wonderful.
Unfortunately, you have to be a Filipino designer.
Special guest. Special guest.
But if you collaborate,
if they collaborate. Yeah.
Yes.
Who knows? Goes to Bambina, right?
Yeah. Like a special event with international visitors, right?
Once, work on it now.
Yes, we'll work on it. We'll work on it.
Hey, do you have opportunities like this with other designers in South Africa? Or it's just Fashion Week?
Well, we do have, and this sounds fantastic, and I must be honest, I was thinking about this and thinking this would be a great thing to replicate here, because in some ways we do operate in silos. We do come together in certain platforms, but mostly through Fashion Week, that sort of thing. But there needs to be, and it's ironic because we have a word in South Africa called Ubuntu, about community. And I think to a large extent in South Africa, the designers don't really engage and connect that much as what we could do. So I think I'm going to draw a little bit of inspiration about this and try and see how I can get us all talking together here in South Africa.
Because what's beautiful, Craig, with the Katutubo, Gabrielle, is not only are the designers there, but we actually sell our clothes immediately. It's not open to just stores. It's basically when you go in there, it's slow fashion, but at the same time you buy it immediately. And you can also place an order. But what's really interesting is it's like a chanoy or a coterie, but you can buy. And you don't have to wait. So I think it's a wonderful thing. Mons can share you after this, and you can have a separate conversation.
We'll visit you when you launch your first pop-up. We'll be there. Hopefully we can.
Why not? Wow. Well, I have a question. I have a brief question here, sorry, but just to the point made earlier about the importance of learning and educating. Hope to know more venues in which we can learn, meet, and see various weavers and methods. How would we do that?
There is, in the Philippines, we have an agency called the Philippine Textile Research Institute, or the PTRI. They have a website, but it's been very helpful for me. And I'm sure Anne can share also more information. But I know I go to PTRI for that.
PTRI, okay. Philippine Textile
Research Institute.
So I haven't really, because I guess I focus on the craft more. On embroidery, the thing is, yes, I have to use imported fabric, and then the embroidery is done locally. I mean, even the embroidery thread is imported, but we don't have that. We don't have we don't have it locally. What we do have here is like the weaves. So that's the only thing really I've done in terms of using fabric, but using it from people like Anya who specialize in that.
Yeah, to answer Miss Margarita's question, so Clientele is launching its fabric store by the end of the month, and we're working on having more venues for consumer education. So we'll probably be hosting a series of workshops around weaving, the process of weaving, our materials culture, the materials that go into weaving, and why are we not using cotton? What's the limitation in terms of the input materials? And also, hopefully, we'll be able to engage our weaving partners also in this platform. So they will have direct access to interested customers like you are. So if you a shameless plug already, if you can follow our social media and our Facebook page, we'll put our announcement out there when we launch the site.
Great. And if you have any questions, please just send them to events@manilahouseinc.com, and we'll pass them on to any of the speakers you want to get in touch with. I think Mia Villanueva has something to say.
Yeah.
Mia,
Hi everybody. Hi everybody. Yeah, I'm also I work with local weaves, but not like not clothes. But then I also am part of Hobby, the Philippine Textile Council. And like, I guess one of my questions is what we always get is like, it's so difficult because a lot of the buyers feel that everything is so expensive. You know, like that's don't I understand what goes into it. I understand the cost and everything. But then how do you explain? I want to hear it from the designers, how you reply to that, like because a lot say that, oh, it's elitist also. You know, it's elitist. Like, kayo bumili ng mga damit ni, Anne-Marie's my friend. She won't get hurt. Pwede nyo bilhin yung damit ni Anne-Marie kasi mahal yan kasi kaya nyo yan. Pero kami, hindi namin ma-afford yan. You get me? So like,
basically, you can buy
I guess my question is, how do we reply to that? Because it's a valid question. And like, you know, like me in Hobby, we're always trying to, like with our bazaars or market fairs, we're always trying to make it somewhat accessible to all, you know, accessible to all. And this is a problem because I know that the things are quite pricey, you know. So how would you reply to that?
Anya,
Well, okay, I'll pick that up. For me, I've always relied on what I call, what do you value the most? I mean, we cannot put a price on all of these things. I mean, we can, but we cannot sort of like undervalue what they do. By making it very, very cheap or very too cheap, you undervalue what they do as skilled people. And unfortunately, again, it's part of that education process. There's a way to actually discuss this. And sometimes you don't have to say anything, but just put the piece side by one another. And I've always believed in that. If something intrinsically costs, let's say, $200, versus something that costs $5, you can actually see the difference. And for me, sometimes it's best not to say anything, but just to let your product speak for itself. Yeah. Primarily because you will always find your market. And as a designer, you will always find your niche. And as a person, it really depends. Who do you want to sell to? You ask yourself that. Who do you want to make for? Because if you value what you do, obviously, in my opinion, in my case, I would like to do less things of a higher value. I've learned that the hard way. That I don't want to make so many things, and then it will happen. I will just have too much inventory. What I want is to do less things of high quality, of high value, and my market will follow that. So at the end of the day, that's how I don't have to explain it. That's who I am. And so far, it's been wonderful.
I agree with you. But I guess my point is that, like let's say, like when you go to India or you go to Malaysia, everybody's wearing their textile. So I am trying to figure out also how to make it accessible to everybody. That's my dream. Like everybody on the street should be wearing Philippine style.
I understand, but in that case, you have to sort of like open the dialogue to people who have that capacity. And Mr. Ben Chan is one person who was able to do that by creating the Terno T-shirts. He was able to do that. It is possible. It is possible, but it really depends on what you want to do. If that is your dream, then Mons, introduce her to somebody who will have that conduit to encourage her dream.
Well,
for me, it's a matter.
I really feel Bench has done a lot of work with this. Like they've really been able to make
that's just an example.
Yeah,
very true. Yeah, very true.
Bench has really made it more accessible, and like everybody sees that they want to be wearing Filipino clothes. So I also see that. I see that. So I think you're making strides there as well. And
I think, Miss Mia, if I may add, it takes a process, right? I mean, if the vision is for every Filipino to be able to wear a weave, we have to take small steps. You know, it's not just like, obviously, like those who have low incomes are not able to afford a full weave, but perhaps they can afford a bench t-shirt with a weave accent, which is what Bench did in our collaboration with Miss Mons.
Yes.
But to address consumer education, to me, the answer is really transparency. It's not something that a lot of people are able to do because of fears of how they can be judged or misinterpreted, but be as transparent as you can and break down the cost for people who ask, why is it expensive? Also, turn the question back to the consumer. What are you really paying for? Because as Raho said, you're not just paying for the face value of the material or the clothing. You're paying for cultural preservation. You're paying for innovation and design, and the hours spent figuring out what the color is, what the construction is. Even sewing our fabrics is very difficult. So seamstresses also have to be paid. You have to look at the entire value chain, because in every step in the supply chain, you create value to every maker, and that's what you really pay for. The value that we provide at every step of the chain, not just the end product.
Sometimes I'm a little provocant when I'm in front of people like this. You want to be paid well for your job. So what is your job? I start asking, what is your profession? And they say, what do you mean? And I say, yeah, what is your job? And then the conversation starts, and I try to get it out of them. And then we start, and then I say, and you want to be valued. You want to be appreciated, and you want to have a salary at the end of your month for your family. And then I see a shift in their eyes, in their thinking. That's how, if really somebody does it too hard, arguing about the price point, I try to find a way this way to talk about.
What I wanted to say about it is there was a quote that I loved reminding people of, that this trend forecaster Lee Edelcourt said a few years ago, where she said, it's bizarre that today in the world, a dress can cost less than a sandwich. Yes. And what's happened is that clothing has become, it's because of the mass production of clothing, we've changed the language when it comes to clothing. We talk about disposable fashion and fast fashion, which dilutes the value of something that's created with soul. And when I always tell people, when they talk about question price, I say, and the worst thing I hate is when someone says, oh, I got a bargain. And I say, if it was a bargain, someone else had to pay the price for you to get that for so much cheaper. When you think about the person who was tied to their sewing machine, they paid the price. So that's not really a bargain. So I think we need to, it's the conversation about clothing, about value, about price, and also like Anya was talking about, unpacking it. I don't even think I need to do that anymore for people. I just say like, kind of, it's not for you if you think it's too much.
It's not your market.
This is the price. This is it, you know?
Yeah. My friend had a good way of putting it. It's not that slow fashion is expensive. It's just that fast fashion is so cheap.
Yes, exactly.
Yes. But I think there's also a perception issue here, because we ourselves tend to devalue. It's changing now, but we tended to devalue our own craft and thinking, oh, it's cheap, you know, it's just handicrafts and all that we would see, and you know, in all those handicraft stores. And all of a sudden, it's become current, right? It's become part of fashion. The quality of the fabrics has evolved. The quality of the workmanship has improved. And I think some people are still having a hard time accepting that, hey, that's just local. Why do you have to charge so much? But when you understand the amount of work, the amount of soul that goes into it, then, you know, it does require a mind shift.
And for me also, it's a matter of, for me, one of my goals is to sustain the work, you know, to consistently give them work. So in doing that, I have, you know, that costs, right?
Because you have to have healthy margins.
Yeah, I have, so my prices are expensive, but I am consistently giving them work. That's for me what I try to do for sustainability is to sustain their livelihoods, to keep it going, to not stop, so that every month I give them something to do. I give them something that they earn a living from. So that's also, I think, what makes my product a little bit more expensive, or actually more expensive.
We were talking about this the other day, right? I mean, for here, it's considered expensive, right? And your clothes.
Yeah. But
And
actually abroad,
Bravo.
for what we charge, for what I charge for something that's hand embroidered, you know, with premium thread, premium materials, it's very affordable compared to what a brand abroad would charge. And even for the hand weaving, abroad would be
so much more.
Yeah. I think maybe here, hopefully that's changing. I think now we're sort of we're giving more importance and giving more value to all that, the process and the handwork that goes into all our products.
No, and kudos to Bonds for,
exactly,
for bringing it all together.
But I'd also like to give credit to Artefino, Habi. There are other pop-ups also that inspired me, and hopefully we inspired them. So it's also us working together and not competing with each other. Yeah. So we have those other venues.
Lately, I don't know if that's what you meant, Rahul, but it's like a renaissance. But there is a whole revival now, right, of all of this, and I
Absolutely.
think. And I think it starts with a certain quality of fabric, but then I think the more people are using it, the more people are creating brands that have it, the better, the more demand, and the better our fabrics will also get eventually.
I mean, the beauty, I guess, of the culture now, it is we're a strong collective, even if there's so much activities that are going on, but it's a strong collective, a unified collective, and very collaborative culture. We're not kind of there's no more crab mentality in this space. That's what I'm trying to say.
Okay, well, before we close, I think it's getting late, and thank you so much everybody for staying with us. I also want to mention that we actually have 3 Manila House members among our panel. We have Mon and Rajo and Anne-Marie joining us today. So it's a real privilege for me as well as part of Manila House to be able to have our own members as part of, as part of our webinars. And then Craig, of course, and who's a very good friend from South Africa, and Gabby for joining us today. And Anya, it's a pleasure to meet you. Thank you to Asian Society for making this happen as well. Can we just do a lightning round about maybe, why it's important to wear I'll borrow Mon's hashtag, why it's important to wear your culture. Who wants to start?
I can start.
Oh, go ahead, Anya.
Okay. We always say that the continuity of our culture lies in the hands of the young. And so that's why I feel it's so important for us to wear our tribe with pride, wear our culture, because this is what sustainability means for our identity.
Great. Who wants to go next?
I can say, I mean, for me, why it's important to wear your culture is because it's you're transmitting a message about who you are by simply just wearing clothing. So I think it's your own cultural billboard.
That's a great way of putting it. Rahul?
Well, in my case, I believe that it is the essence of ourself. Without our culture, without our identity, we cease to become human beings. We cease to become coming from a place. We cease to become who we are as a people. And to be able to wear our culture, to be able to express ourselves through the way we wear our clothes is the highest form of being true to oneself and finding out we are part of the human race. We are part of the world. I am Filipino, and that's why I express that, because I am part of the world.
That's lovely, great. Gabrielle?
as I'm an accessory designer and not a clothing designer, I just can repeat what I said in the beginning. I would like to support the individuality of every woman. You know, every woman is every wearer is a strong personality, which I would like to get stand out.
Thanks. Anne-Marie?
Well, for me, I think it's important to wear, for me, it's wearing what's Filipino for me is the craft of embroidery. So at the end of the day, I guess it promotes my identity or the culture at the end of the day, because it's a craft. It's an old tradition that's been passed around for generations, and we need to support it. We need to keep it going. We need to value it and celebrate it.
Mon?
Yeah, for me, wearing our culture tells people how proud we are of where we came from. And we have to continue to promote, especially to the young ones, wearing our culture, because we don't want to lose this beautiful heritage that we have, culture that we have. So it's something done, it was something created long ago. With this fast-changing world with computers and everything, I think we have to always look back on where we came from and be proud of who we are.
Oh, amen to all of that. Thank you for your amazing insights. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, especially Craig and Gabrielle, for joining us from overseas. I'm going to turn you over now. Before I say goodbye to everyone, I'd like Joy Alampay, from Executive Director of Asian Society Philippines, to just give a few closing remarks.
Hi, thank you, Bambina. It's not going to be long. I just want to thank everyone for this talk, for the education. And I believe the conversation should go on and continue, because it's very important for us to continue the finding the gaps and talking about how each one of us can help each other. And we at Asia Society, on behalf of Doris Magsaysayo, our chair, are just here to help each of you in whatever way we can. So thank you for the opportunity, Bambina, and nice to meet you all. More power to each of your causes and organizations.
Thank you so much, Joy. And just Joy, we must mention that Anya is a fellow, of
Yes,
Asian
2011. Yeah.
Yes, Anya is our Asia Society Asia 21 young leader. So we're very proud of her.
Amazing.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Joy, for having me. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. This has been really insightful and actually so timely, because for Gabrielle and Craig, this is actually the month that we celebrate our national heritage, our national language.
Yes.
We call it Buwan ng Wika. So clothing is a language, right? What we wear is
clothing is a language.
Clothes. So it just ties in really nicely with the whole month and the whole theme, and
Thank you
pride.
so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us.
It was nice to see you all.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you so much, everyone. It was fun. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you.
Take care. Be safe.
Keep in touch.
Thank you, Bambina.
Bye.